Are we living in an era with more revolutionary change than has been the case during the past? The answer is yes.
Learning for me is entirely about behaviour change.
If you have those problems and you decide the answer to those problems is to think about employee engagement, you're rather missing the point.
Organisations are changing, the world is changing, the demographics are changing, who we trade with is changing.
We tend to mobilise head office, central teams, go through top-down change that we roll out on the organisation. So why is it we're surprised when there's high resistance and a lack of buy-in to what we're selling?
If you look at digital native businesses like Amazon, Airbnb, they don't talk about transformation because they were born digital.
Hi, and welcome to the Business Transformation Network's podcast. The BTN is an online media platform and job board focusing on transformational content, which we break down into three main categories: people, process, and technology. We host free events around these topics with experts in their field, and this podcast is brought to you by the BTN and their editor and your host, me, Emma McDermott. As always, if you enjoy our podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. All links from this podcast will be provided with the description on iTunes, Audible, or whichever app you listen to your podcasts on. This Business Transformation Network podcast is brought to you in partnership with Sage People. Sage People enable mid-size multinational companies to manage their workforce through its global cloud HR and people system, which transforms how your organisation acquires, engages, manages and develops your employees.
Today with us, we have Professor Agnis Stibe, who is a 4-time TEDx speaker, an executive consultant for transformation leadership, and also a transformation professor at EM Normandy Business School. Agnis is here to talk to us about using tech to amplify human change. This conversation was quite a long one, so we have split it into 2 parts. So here's part 1. Thank you so much for your time today, Agnis. Could you please introduce yourself and what you do to our listeners?
Yes, my name is Agnis Stibe, and I am trying to accelerate conscious evolution. And how do I do that? I do 2 major parts in my life. One, I am a professor of transformation at the EM Normandy Business School, where I also direct a new grad program on artificial intelligence. Plus, I'm very active applied scientist, which means practitioner. So I deliver keynotes, master classes, and consulting to organizations, businesses, and government.
Amazing. And so today we're just going to talk a little bit around using technology to amplify human change. So to get us started, you've done a couple of TED Talks on change, but people and organizations still seem to not quite grasp the human aspects of change. So can you talk through why this is a little bit, please?
I think we are kind of facing our human nature in so many aspects in everyday lives as a human beings, and also as managers, leaders, other organizations and societies. And it's quite obvious when we look at our senses. Predominantly our senses are direct outward. So seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, feeling is how we experience our world. And at the same time, the depth of our human nature is in ourselves. It's kind of deeply rooted in our genes and our evolution. And from that perspective, we don't have enough equipment to constantly monitor what's happening with our own inner changes and our willingness or our ability to change ourselves. And therefore, whenever we conventionally look at organization, for example, it's much easier to look at how can we build a new building for hosting our employees, or how to redesign interior or offices and maybe desks and chairs, and even technology, what kind of technology we will put into their computers and what we would request from them in terms of the processes. At the same time, it requires more deeper insights and understanding and willingness to go in the area which really is in the human beings, which is how they think, what they believe, and how these beliefs and attitudes are then representing in their behaviors. That journey is intuitively more complex because we don't have the tools, or we don't have these senses that would constantly inform us what's happening with the beliefs and attitudes and so forth. Therefore, it's a little bit contrasting that the usual perception how people are willing and are doing great work in redesigning the companies, the experiences, and all of the processes that are more like environmental factors. But when it comes to really personal factors, which is attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions, then this is a field where people try to not speak about or try to avoid. Therefore, that's how I see it. And I even have written scientific publications on that, exemplifying how people are very comfortably speaking about such things as organizational transformation, business transformation, process transformation, all of these kind of tangible outside environmental factors to be transformed, digital transformation, including that. But when it comes to real psychological, behavioral, attitudinal transformation, this is what is missing. And that's why I'm so passionate to really specifically speak about that, because the core success for organizations, for businesses, really depends on how their people are thinking, what they are thinking, and constantly their thinking is determining their behavior, and their behavior is determining their performance, and their performance determining the success of organizations and businesses.
Absolutely. And so people often associate change with a negative process or negative outcomes, which prevents anything significant from really changing in the long term. So how do we overcome this and change the narrative?
There is, again, very, to my mind, very clear way to see the change and why the change is perceived difficult. This is what I also speak in my keynotes when I say, well, what's the convenient or what's the common way how change or transformation is described? Usually people would say, what do you think about change? They would say, oh, change is difficult. And that's exactly the question. Instead of that, if we understand and we have the self-clarity, what change means internally, then it becomes easier to deal with. So my first response is, if you look at our human biology, we humans are driven by some form of energy. And if we look at our inner cellular construction and how our body operates, we generally take energy from oxygen that we breathe and from sugar that we consume. And those are the two main sources of energy for human being. And especially if we look at that part, which is in human being determining their attitudes and behaviors, which is brain. The brain has all of these trillions of neurons. And we also know from the recent discoveries over the last decades about, first of all, epigenetics, which means that not only genes determine how we live, but also the choices and environment determines how we behave and how we live and what would be the outcomes of our choices and behaviors. And then we also have learned that neurons in our brains have the plasticity, which means they can rewire, unwire from the old connections and rewire in new forms. And this is, from my perspective, a way how to understand why the change is perceived difficult, because it requires this neuron network, the neural networks in our brains. And let me give you an example. So one network of the neural connections would represent a habit, a behavioral habit. And if it's there, it's fixed. And this is how these neurons have been communicating and interchanging information over the last, say, month and years. And this is how habits reside in our brains. And now, if the neuroplasticity allows some of these neural connections to unwire and rewire differently, which means changing the habit, changing the behavior, what it requires energy. What kind of energy? Oxygen and sugar. That would be the necessary ingredients or the fuel for this change to happen. And why it feels difficult? Because all the rest of the body is asking this question. It's like, why do we need to get this energy, like sugar and oxygen, to particularly changing these neural networks in the brain? Maybe we would better be off using this energy for pumping blood or pressing lungs or whatever else is necessary for the body to function. So therefore, from my perspective, this sense or this feeling of change being difficult, it has this multi-layered picture where I see the biological layer, where there is this inner negotiation in the body. What do we do with this portion of energy in terms of oxygen and sugar? Do we go about changing this neural network in the brain to acquire a new habit, or do we do some other function with it? So that is why it's kind of even on the subconscious level, it feels like, oh, why do I really need to do it? And then the next layer is intellectual layer, where people start to have the conversation with themselves. Well, they have the psychological inner debate, and they are saying, well, maybe I will just continue the way I have been working in this company, and I will ignore this changes, and I will hope that they will not, I will not need to face them. But otherwise, people would say, well, this is a new process that the organization is implementing. This is a new software that they require their salespeople to be using on a daily basis. And then the people say, well, I will invest a little bit of my energy, my time and effort, and I will adopt. I will adopt to this new culture, the new processes, and that will be beneficial for me. And I think these are the two most common ways how people, especially in organizational setting, are facing the change. So there's this external change that is imposed by the organization, and then people have these two alternatives. Do I pretend that I'm accepting it, but actually not, which is another topic that I usually discuss. And I say that people are wearing masks, and if they wear masks and pretend they're happy, but actually unhappy, there is a big kind of, it raises a big difference between their feeling and how they really perform, and that usually creates a burnout. And the other people that say, okay, the changes happen, I know what to do with them, I will just take and put some effort and would welcome them into my life, and therefore they usually are better at performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're going to come back to sort of the people piece in a minute, but for now I just wanted to explore sort of the more change and transformation side of things. So I believe you have a framework for change and transformation, which is the transforming framework. So could you give us a bit of a deeper understanding into how this works and builds on any pre-existing models?
Yes, indeed. So as I introduced in the beginning, I'm an applied scientist. So I used science-driven insights and knowledge and simplify them to the degree that they become unapplicable tools for everyday changes and transformations in organization. So I have transforming framework. It has 8 applicable tools. All of the 8 tools are scientifically validated. They come from sciences. Some of them have been borrowed from longer term scientific discoveries in social sciences, dating back from the mid last century. That's about social cognitive theory, which is tool number 1, how attitudes, behaviors, and environment, all 3 components are constantly reshaping each other. And that's very essential to start with when discussing how to approach a change and transformation in organization. Then there is a second tool, which is also borrowed, which explains that there is this degree, to what degree people are having troubles with their attitudes, positive or negative in organization, and to what degree the environment that the organization is supporting or not supporting the change. And these two, by fluctuating up and down, are determining whether people actually will change the behavior or not. And then moving on, I have built my own tools and validated during my time at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where I was applying this transforming framework to reshaping how people live in cities. So thinking about the urban interventions and behavioral change at scale. So altogether, there are 8 tools. 4 of the initial tools, so first 4, they are really about investigation. Investigate where is the root cause. Many problems are left unsolved because too early people jump into solving something without understanding where the root cause actually is. And they usually look at the symptoms, they say, oh, here's the problem, let's fix it. But they are fixing symptoms, and therefore the problem remains. So that's why out of 8 tools, half of them is really make sure where is the attitudinal problem, where people are thinking in a way that is not productive for themselves and for the company, and then really what are the context around that. So first 4 tools, investigation phase. And then after that, of course, once you realize which is the problem, where is the problem, how does it look like, then you start solving it. And this is the next 2 tools, which is architecture and social, which explains how you can use technology to really accelerate that change. So you would be implementing different kind of data-driven quick feedback loops using a basic technology like screens or sounds or colors and some business analytics. Those are the tools 5 and 6. And 7 and 8, to conclude the transforming framework, those are about ensuring long-term success. Because sometimes you can implement a new, let's say, technology-driven supportive system, but people in the long run might say, well, that was fun, but I'm not willing to kind of react to this anymore. And there also could be some dark patterns or backfiring effects as well. And those are discussed in tools 7 and 8, which are specifically attached to make sure once you have created this solution, you have implemented that in your organization, these 2 tools are making like an insurance for the company that it's gonna work sustainably, and it will sustainably help to transform the organization, and also in the ethical way. So the last tool is ethics, which is very important because these technologies, they are built to influence what people think and do. So this is a very sensitive topic, and therefore the ethics is at the highest importance once dealing with such powerful and influential technology in organizations. So that's shortly the 8 tools from the transforming framework that is available for the organizations to apply already today.
That's really interesting. And so you also talk sort of a little bit around transforming design as a means of blending technological innovations with human nature for sustainable business and societal change as well, which you just touched on there. So how does this work?
Yes, to continue deeper exploration, how the transforming framework actually blends and intertwines 2 major components of our daily experiences, our human nature, understanding how our psychology works, how we make decisions, how we can change our attitudes, how our attitudes determine our behaviors and performances, and blend that with the technological advances, with the innovations that are much more capable in certain areas, much more capable than human beings. So the design is the mastery of combining these 2. We can always design technologies for the primary tasks. So we can have social media as an example. We can have customer relationship management software for the organization. We can have enterprise resource planning system. Whatever that is, there's a technology with its primary task to serve a need in the organization, for example. What is meant by transforming design? So that design is not only giving comfortable, easy way to do your primary task, but it's complemented with some psychology-informed design features that are simultaneously coping with some of the behavioral challenges in the organization. Let me give you an example. Imagine there is an organization with a sales department. So they are selling their products and services. And there is a CRM system where the salespeople are reporting all their activities, when they made calls, what kind of information they shared through the emails, what else, what is the next plans. At the same time, that company introduces a new CRM system. And naturally, again, we face the change. And if the change is faced, then some people would be resisting that and say, well, I like the previous system better. Why should I use this one? And if we don't have any other ways to monitor the acceptance of the new CRM system, some of the people in the sales department, let's say they are 10 people in the sales department, and some of the people would think it's a good idea. Let's say 2 people say, yes, that's a good idea. I will take up the new CRM system. I'll do whatever it requires to do, and that helps me to work. There will be people that would say, it's nice, let me try, but I'm not sure. But I'm positive about the new system being better than the old one, but still I'm hesitant because I have the old habit of how it was in the previous CRM system. And the third group of people would be saying, no way, I'm not going to do this. I'm against it. I will stick with the old one. I don't see the reason to take the new one. And this is how we know we will have these three major groups of people: the positive, the green ones, the negative, the very other end, negative, the red ones, and also these yellow people would say, oh, it's a good idea, but they're still hesitant to take it up. And if that kind of statistics would be on a daily basis communicated to the right audience, then that design by its nature not only will be giving the salespeople opportunity to report their sales meetings or the meetings with the clients or other interactions with their customers, but simultaneously it would communicate through the change of the color, through the numbers, different other features. It will tell how many other salespeople every single day, every single moment are using the system. And that would be the data-driven way to reflect that the perceptions and imagination of the people or created answers are wrong. Because if we don't have this quick feedback loop about how many other people have constantly using the system, the people are creating their own answers. And they say, well, I don't believe the red people that are against the system would say, I don't see anyone using it. I believe nobody is using it. And that's wrong, because two people are green and they are using it. And there are maybe even 8 people, no, but let's say 6 people that are yellow people, which say, I kind of believe it's a good one. I'm still just hesitant. I'm slowly adapting to it. And if with that transparency are included into the design, and through the design, whenever people connect to the system, are seeing others that have been using the system earlier today, or how long they have been filling out the forms that are required by the system. All of this data is available in these systems. All the logins, all the time that they've spent there, everything is accessible. And the suggestion from the transforming design perspective is, why don't we use these behavioral traces of choices of the people, the other people similar in the organization, like in this case, in the sales department, and display it in such a way that it's motivating, it's empowering, and it's encouraging those hesitant yellow people transforming towards green. Because also yellow people would say, I'm positive about the system, but still I'm hesitant to take it really fully and using it fully, because I'm not sure if anybody in my sales department actually are using it. But now, if on a daily basis they see, well, there are 2 people constantly using it, they seem to be happy, so maybe I should do it too. So that's the basic idea, how the psychology of human beings and how we perceive the world, how we create our answers to the questions if we don't have any data-driven feedback, any kind of information about statistics, and how we can overcome that barrier, how we can remove this barrier that is given us by human nature, which means if we don't know the answer, we are creating the answer. What I'm suggesting by this kind of technology and this kind of transforming design is design by itself can remove that unnecessary debate, the internal debate about what is really there, what facts, what statistics we have about other people. And once we show that to the users in a specifically intelligently designed way, first of all, that design is very powerful by giving the impression and transparency. And secondly, it uses the power of social influence. It's not that the leadership team or the managers told you to do it. It's because other people are doing it. That's called social influence. And we constantly, this is how we are hardwired. We are social beings by nature, evolving through thousands of years. We react to other people no matter what. And if we use that social psychology from our human nature and include it into the transforming design, this is how we can create the most impactful and most sustainable change and transformation.
That's really interesting, actually, especially on sort of the human nature and the influencing side of things. And so a lot of your work looks at how we can use technology to demystify the human nature, like you mentioned there, and ensure successful transformation. So how would this work?
Another good thing about technology is that it's not only serving us by accelerating some of our tasks. So knowing technology can do things faster than us. technology can store more information and also provide access faster, search faster, different other technological advances that are really beneficial for us to do whatever we do in our organizations or business or society. The other benefit of technology is technology by its nature should be neutral, because technology doesn't have its own purpose. The purpose is given by the developer of technology or by designer of technology. At the same time, it also reveals our human nature in the other aspect. It also reveals how human beings, on the other end of technology, which are the users, are using this technology. And if we make a step back and look at how the world of technology is interplaying with the humans that are using it, we would be able to observe that there is a dynamic. There is a dynamic how the users are specifically choosing the ways how they are interacting, what do they like about technology, what they don't like about technology, and where they want to use more of it, when they want to use less of it. And on the other end are technology designers, how they design it. And sometimes their intentions are good and they're helping people achieve their tasks. But sometimes, and we have seen evidence in this world, that sometimes people design technologies with not that level of transparency, and sometimes make their users addicted, sometimes addicted to games, sometimes addicted to spending more time. People speak about this as attention economy. So they try to distract the people and attract them to their platforms and use that as a selling point for the advertisements. So therefore, in this process, in this kind of overall dance of human nature from the one end as designers and from the other end as the users, is exposing some of the details in our own human nature that are potentially not that beneficial, not that contributing to the well-being, or not that contributing to the performances of the organizations. Sometimes I refer, in this case, to technology as the big mirror. So technology enables human beings to see their reflection. And to summarize what I described before, it really enables to enable the designers and developers technology to look into that technology mirror and ask themselves, is this technology that I'm creating really contributing to the well-being of the users that I am expecting to use my product or service, technology-driven product service, or am I really increasing the value for this company by providing the service and value? What is the balance between my interest and the interest of the users or the companies that are going to use my technology? So that's one part of the mirror. And also the other part of the mirror depends on the users. So if the users are having time or investing time to be more aware, what is the outcome of how they use technology? What is the outcome of the use of technology on their daily lives, on their well-being, on their health, on their stress levels? And that's really about the many users that currently are experiencing some sort of addiction from the technology, and they have been evidencing so many bad consequences. So people have decreased self-esteem, people have anxiety, people have need to constantly be connected. And that's another reflection that says there is something in our human nature that is triggering these events to happen. And if we want to be more mindful, and if we want to be more conscious and aware of what is happening with us as the interaction with technology, then we would be more informed what kind of technology we are actually willing to have and actually willing to develop and also request, because that's always the relationship. There are developers and users, and this should be a balanced relationship. And this is balanced relationship from my perspective. Number one, we are building these products and services in the way that is not against our human nature, but actually using the positive aspects of our human evolution and then incorporate that into this human technology interaction.
That's a really interesting piece, especially when you're talking about sort of the addiction side of things, with like when you look at social media, for example, because there seems to be quite a dysfunctional relationship there for a lot of people. So in part 2, we're going to continue to cover the use of tech to amplify human change, but this is quite a good place to stop for now, so we're going to leave it here for this part. In part 2, we will continue to explore this, starting by looking at the role of trust and transparency.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoyed it or learned something. For more content like this, please subscribe to the BTN website. As always, we really appreciate any thoughts and feedback about the show. You can reach us on Twitter @thebusinesstn, or you can email us at emma@thebtn.tv with any questions or suggestions for future episodes. We read all emails and will always try to respond as soon as possible. This episode is sponsored by Sage People. Thanks.